Sienna God, hello all. It's just that good evening. Thank you for watching. So this is day 9, part B of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an Inquiry into Values by Robert M. Persig. He returned to his Midwest he returned to his Midwest, picked up a practical degree in journalism, married, lived in Nevada and Mexico, did odd jobs, worked as a journalist, a science writer, and an industrial advertising writer. I literally thought I was going to say he returned to his Midwest apartment, home, something, right? No. Anyway, he fathered 2 children, bought a farm and a riding horse and 2 cars, and was starting to put on middle-aged weight. His pursuit of what has been called the ghost of reason had been given up. That's extremely important to understand. He had given up. Because he'd given up, the surface of life was comfortable for him. He worked reasonably hard, was easy to get along with, and except for an occasional glimpse of inner emptiness shown in some short stories he wrote at the time, his days passed quite usually. What started him up here into these mountains isn't certain. His wife seems not to know, but I'd guess it was perhaps some of those inner feelings of failure and the hope that somehow this might take him back on the track again. He had become much more mature, as if the abandonment of his inner goals had caused him somehow to age more quickly. We exit from the park at Gardner, where not much rain seems to fall because the mountainsides show only grass and sage in the twilight. We decide to stay here for the night. The town is on high banks on either side of a bridge over a river which rushes over smooth and clean borders. Across the bridge, they've already turned the lights on at the motel where we check in, but even in the artificial light coming from the windows, I can see each cabin has been carefully surrounded by planted flowers, and so I step carefully to avoid them. I notice things about the cabin too, which I point out to Chris. The windows are all double hung and sash weighted. The doors click shut without looseness. All the moldings are perfectly mitered. Compound miter saw cuts the angles. Anyways, moving on. There's nothing arty about all this. It's just well done, and something tells me is all done by one person. When we return to the motel from the restaurant, an elderly couple are sitting in a small garden outside the office enjoying their evening breeze. The man confirms that he's made all the cabins himself and is so pleased it's been noticed that his wife, who sees this, invites us all to sit down. We talk with no need to hurry. This is the oldest entrance to the park. It was used before there were any automobiles. They talk about changes that have taken place over the years, adding a dimension to what we see around us, and it builds to a kind of beautiful thing. This town, this couple, and the years that have gone by here. Sylvia puts her hand on John's arm. I'm conscious of the sounds of the river rushing past boulders below and a fragrance in the night wind. The woman who knows all fragrances says it is honeysuckle. And we are quite quiet for a while, and I become pleasantly drowsy. Chris is almost asleep when we decide to turn in. Chapter 13. John and Sylvia eat their breakfast, hotcakes, and drink their coffee. Still caught up in the mood of the last night, but I'm finding it hard to get food down. Today we should arrive at the school, the place where an enormous coalescence of things occurred, and I'm already feeling tense. I remember reading once about an archaeological excavation in the Near East, learning about the archaeologist's feelings when he opened the forgotten tombs for the first time in thousands of years. Now I feel like some archaeologist myself. The sagebrush down the canyon now toward Livingston is like sagebrush you see all the way from here into Mexico. This morning's sunlight is the same as yesterday's, except warmer and softer now that we're at a lower altitude again. There is nothing unusual. It's just the archaeological feeling that the calmness of the surroundings conceals things. A haunted place. I really don't want to go there. I just as soon turn around and go back. Just tension, I guess. If it's one of the fragments of this memory in which many mornings the tension was so intense, he would throw up everything before he got to his first classroom. He loathed appearing before classrooms of students and talking. It was a complete violation of his whole lone, isolated way of life, and what he experienced was intense stage fright, except that it never showed on him as stage fright, but rather a terrific intensity about everything he did. Students had told his wife it was just like electricity in the air. The moment he entered the classroom, all eyes turned on him and followed him as he walked to the front of the room. All conversation died to a hush and remained at a hush, even though it was several minutes, often before the class started. Throughout the hour, the eyes never strayed from him. He became much talked about, a controversial figure. The majority of students avoided his sections, like the Black Death. Oh man, he had heard too many stories. The school was what could euphemistically be called a teaching college. At a teaching college, you teach and you teach and you teach with no time for research, no time for contemplation, no time for participation in outside affairs. Just teach and teach and teach until your mind grows dull and your creativity vanishes and you become an automaton saying the same dull things over and over to endless waves of innocent students who cannot understand why you're so dull. Lose respect and fan this disrespect out into the community. Dang. The reason you teach and you teach and you teach is that this is a very clever way of running a college on the cheap while giving a false appearance of genuine education. Yet, despite this, he called the school by a name that didn't make much sense. In fact, sounded a little ludicrous in view of its actual nature. But the name had great meaning to him, and he stuck to it, and he felt before he left that he had rammed it into a few minds sufficiently hard to make it stick. He called it a church of reason. And much of the puzzlement people had about him could have ended if they understood what he meant by this. Please explain, because I don't understand that. The state of Montana at this time was undergoing an outbreak of ultra right-wing politics, like that which occurred in Dallas, Texas, just prior to President Kennedy's assassination. A nationally known professor from the University of Montana in Missoula was prohibited from speaking on campus on the grounds that it would stir up trouble. Professors were told that all public statements must be cleared through the college public relations office before they could be made. Academic standards were demolished. The legislature had previously prohibited the school from refusing entry to any student over 21, whether he had a high school diploma or not. Oh, wow. Now the legislature had passed a law fining the college $8,000 for every student who failed, virtually in order to pass every student. Oh, dang. The newly elected governor was trying to fire the college president for both personal and political reasons. The college president was not only a personal enemy, he was a Democrat, and the governor was no ordinary Republican. Well, that's terrible. His campaign manager doubled as state coordinator for the John Birch Society. This was the same governor who supplied the list of 50 subversives that we heard about a few days ago. Now, as part of this vendetta, funds to the college were being cut. The college president had passed on an unusually large part of the cut to the English department, of which Phaedrus was a member, and whose members had been quite vocal on issues of academic freedom. Phaedrus had given up, was exchanging letters with the Northwest Regional Accrediting Association to see if they could help prevent these violations of accreditation requirements. In addition to this private correspondence, he had publicly called for an investigation of the entire school situation. At this point, some students in one of his classes had asked Phaedrus bitterly if his efforts to stop accreditation meant he was trying to prevent them from getting an education. Phaedrus said no. Then one student, apparently a partisan of the governor, said angrily that the legislature would prevent the school from losing its accreditation. Phaedrus asked how. The student said they would post police to prevent it. Phaedrus pondered this for a while, then realized the enormity of the student's misconception of what accreditation was all about. That night, for the next day's lecture, he wrote out his defense of what he was doing. This was the Church of Reason lecture, which, in contrast to his usual sketchy lecture notes, was very long and very carefully elaborated. It begins with reference to a newspaper article about a country church building with an electric beer sign hanging right over the front entrance. The building had been sold and was being used as a bar. One can guess that some classroom laughter started at this point. The college was well known for drunken partying, and the image vaguely fit. The article said a number of people had complained to the church officials about it. It had been a Catholic church, and the priest who had been delegated to respond to the criticism had sounded quite irritated about the whole thing. To him, it had revealed an incredible ignorance of what a church really was. Did they think that bricks and boards and glass constituted a church? A lot of people do, and it doesn't. Or the shape of the roof? Here, posing a piety was an example of the very materialism the church opposed. The building in question was not holy ground. It had been desanctified. That was the end of it. The beer sign resided over a bar, not a church, and those who couldn't tell the difference were simply revealing something about themselves. Phaedra said the same confusion existed about the university, and that was why loss of accreditation was hard to understand. The real university is not a material object. It is not a group of buildings that can be defended by police. He explained that when a college lost its accreditation, nobody came and shut down the school. There was no legal penalties, no fines, no jail sentences. Classes did not stop. Everything went on just as before. Students got the same education they would if the school didn't lose its accreditation. All that would happen, Phaedra said, would simply be an official recognition of a condition that already existed. It would be similar to excommunication. What would happen is that the real university, which no legislature can dictate to, and which can never be identified by any location of bricks or boards or glass, would simply declare that this place was no longer holy ground. The real university would vanish from it, and all that would be left was the bricks and the books of the material manifestation. It must have been a strange concept to all the students, and I can imagine him waiting for a long time for it to sink in, and perhaps then waiting for the question, what do you think the real university is? Well, I mean, okay, so the college that I went to lost its accreditation, and they didn't tell any of the students. So I signed up for, to be a vet tech, because I was trying to get all of everything that I could out of the way, so that when I actually went to go for my large livestock vet, I would have the experience of a vet tech that I could carry then over, and then I could carry all of the credits and everything over to that, right? I was trying to kind of work my way up from the ground up. And I had no idea that the school lost accreditation. And then I had all these student loans and everything that I didn't think that I needed to pay because I couldn't use my degree. I mean, like, literally, they were still accepting students and taking their money and stuff. Like, I had loans. Like, I used my GI Bill and things. Like, I mean, like, come on, So, yeah, you still get the education, right? But yeah, the paper is just like, you might as well, like, right? Because it doesn't mean anything. Anyways, you have, like, nothing to show for it. So, I felt really stupid and less than and all of this and everything. I just could not use my degree. And they're like, oh, you can use it. You can totally use it. No, you couldn't. Anyway, but we'll still try and get the money, though. Okay. His notes in response to this question state the following. The real university, he said, has no specific location. It owns no property, pays no salaries, and receives no material dues. The real university is a state of mind. It is that great heritage of rational thought that has been brought down to us through the centuries and which does not exist at any specific location. It's a state of mind which is regenerated throughout the centuries by a body of people who traditionally carry the title of professor, but even that title is not part of the real university. The real university is nothing less than the continuing body of reason itself. In addition to the state of mind, reason, there's a legal entity which is unfortunately called by the same name, but which is quite another thing. This is a non-profit corporation, a branch of the state with a specific address that owns property, is capable of paying salaries and receiving money, and of responding to legislative pressures in the process. Kind of makes you wonder. Non-profit, but they're profiting. And a non-profit, like, supposed to be full of volunteers? That's what I always thought. Not for profit. So why are people on the payroll? I don't understand it. Anyways, but this second university, the legal corporation, cannot teach, does not generate new knowledge or evaluate ideas. It is not the real university at all. It is just a church building, the setting, the location at which conditions have been made favorable for the real church to exist. Confusion continually occurs in people who fail to see this difference, he said, and think that control of the church buildings implies control of the church. They see professors as employees of the second university who should abandon reason when told to and take orders with no back talk, the same way employees do in other corporations. They see the second university but fail to see the first. I remember reading this for the first time and remarking about the analytic craftsmanship displayed. He avoided splitting the university into fields or departments and dealing with the results of that analysis. He also avoided the traditional split into students, faculty, and administration. When you split it either of those ways, you get a lot of dull stuff that doesn't really tell you much. You can't get out of the official school bulletin, but Phaedrus split it between the church and the location. And once this cleavage is made, the same rather dull and imponderable institution seen in the bulletin suddenly is seen with a degree of clarity that wasn't previously available. On the basis of the cleavage, he provided explanations for a number of puzzling but normal aspects of university life. After these explanations, he returned to the analogy of the religious church. The citizens who built such a church and pay for it probably have in mind that they're doing this for the community. A good sermon can put the parishioners in a right frame of mind for the coming week. Sunday school will help the children grow up right. The minister who delivers the sermon and directs the Sunday school understands these goals and normally goes along with them. But he also knows that his primary goals are not to serve the community. His primary goal is always to serve God. Normally there's no conflict, but occasionally one creeps in when trustees oppose the minister's sermons and threaten reduction of funds. That happens. A true minister in such situations must act as though he'd never heard the threats. His primary goal isn't to serve the members of the community, but always God. The primary goal of the Church of Reason, Phaedrus said, is always Socrates, his old goal of truth, and its ever-changing forms as it's revealed by the process of rationality. Everything else is subordinate to that. Normally, this goal is in no conflict with the location goal of improving the citizenry. But on occasion, some conflict arises, as in the case of Socrates himself. It arises with trustees and legislators who contributed large amounts of time and money to the location take points of view in opposition to the professor's lectures or public statements. They can then lean on the administration by threatening to cut off funds, and if the professors don't say what they want to hear, that happens too. True churchmen in such situations must act as though they had never heard these threats. Their primary goal never is to serve the community ahead of everything else. Their primary goal is to serve through reason, through goal of truth. That was what he meant by the Church of Reason. There was no question. There was no question, but that it was a concept that was deeply felt by him. He was regarded as something of a troublemaker, but was never censored for it in any proportion to the amount of trouble he made. What saved him from the wrath of everyone around him was partly an unwillingness to give any support to the enemies of the college, but also partly a begrudging understanding that all of his troublemaking was ultimately motivated by a mandate. They were never free from themselves, the mandate to speak the rational truth. The lecture notes explain almost all of why he acted the way he did, but leave one thing unexplained, his fanatic intensity. One can believe in the truth and in the process of reason to discover it, and in resistance to state legislatures, but why burn oneself out day after day over it? The psychological explanations that have been made to me seem inadequate. Stage fright can't sustain that kind of effort month after month. Neither does another explanation sound right, that he was trying to redeem himself for his earlier failure. There is no evidence anywhere that he ever thought of his expulsion from the university as a failure, just an enigma. The explanation I've come to arises from the discrepancy between his lack of faith in scientific reason and the laboratory and his fanatic faith expressed in the Church of Reason lecture. I was thinking about the discrepancy one day, and it suddenly came to me that it wasn't a discrepancy at all. His lack of faith in reason was why he was so fanatically dedicated to it. You're never dedicated to something you have complete confidence in. No one is fanatically shouting that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. They know it's going to rise tomorrow. When people are fanatically dedicated to political or religious faiths or any other kinds of dogmas or goals, it's always because these dogmas or goals are in doubt. The militancy of the Jesuits he somewhat resembled is a case in point. Historically, their zeal stems not from the strength of the Catholic Church, but from its weakness in the face of the Reformation. It was Phaedrus' lack of faith and reason that made him such a fanatic teacher. That makes more sense. And it makes a lot of sense out of the things that followed. Don't go ahead and get love you minute.